Picture Britain in 1953. The war has been over for 8 years, but the streets still feel like it never ended. Petrol is rationed, steel is rationed, and if you want to buy a new car, you might wait years just to get one, because your own government has quietly decided that British cars aren't really for the British anymore. They're for export, for dollars, for debt repayment. And yet, out of that strange, restricted decade, 10 cars would emerge to break every sales record in the country's history. One of them so revolutionary, it would still be shaping the cars you drive today. So how did a nation starved of steel and fuel end up building some of the most important vehicles the world has ever seen? Let's find out, counting down from 10.
Number 10. The Standard 8. We start in Coventry, at the Canley works of the Standard Motor Company. In September 1953, Standard unveiled the 8, a car built for one purpose: to be cheaper than anything else on the market. At £481, it undercut the Austin A30 and the Morris Minor. But that price came at a cost. There was no external boot lid, no passenger side wiper, sliding windows instead of winding ones. British buyers didn't mind. Over 40 miles to the gallon, low tax, and a lively little engine made it a favourite of tradesmen and rural families. As equipment improved through the decade, sales took off, and by 1960, more than 300,000 had been built. Its engine and steering would live on in the Triumph Herald. But if the 8 proved cheap could sell, our next car proved something else entirely: that Britain could sell glamour.
Number 9. The Vauxhall Victor F-Type. In 1957, Vauxhall's Luton factory unveiled something that looked like it had driven straight out of Detroit. The Victor F-Type had tail fins, two-tone paint, and, a first for a mass-produced British car, a deeply curved panoramic wraparound windscreen. It worked. Over half of the 390,880 Victors built were exported, many of them sold through Pontiac dealerships in America. But that dramatic glass came with a hidden price. Body flex during hard cornering could crack the seals, letting water in and corrosion take hold. Vauxhall rushed out revised bodywork within 2 years. Even so, for a moment, the Victor made suburban Britain feel like it was driving something transatlantic. While Vauxhall chased American style, one company across the Midlands was betting on something quieter: respectability.
Number 8. The Hillman Minx. Built by the Roots Group at Brighton-on-Dunsmore, the Minx spent the decade as a fixture of middle-class Britain. But it was the 1956 redesign, styled with input from the American Raymond Loewy studio, that truly transformed it, adding subtle tail fins and two-tone paint to a car trusted by doctors, bank managers and sales executives. Roots tested the new platform in the Sahara and in Arctic Norway before launch, and that same platform underpinned the Sunbeam Rapier, which went on to win the Monte Carlo Rally. Across its run, the Minx topped 420,000 units, proof that solid, dependable engineering could be just as profitable as flair. Speed and status were one path to record sales, but BMC was about to prove that sheer volume was another.
Number 7. The Austin Cambridge. From 1954, Longbridge and Cowley churned out the Cambridge, and by 1959 it wore fresh Pininfarina styling, with Italian tail fins and a wide new grille. Combined 1950 saloon production reached nearly 450,000 units, with commercial vans and pickups serving the post office and tradesmen for decades more. Here's something most people don't know. Under a 1950s licensing deal, Nissan assembled the Cambridge at its Yokohama plant in Japan, giving Japanese engineers their first real exposure to modern British unibody construction. A British family car, quietly seeding Japan's automotive future. But for all of BMC's ambition, one Ford model proved that sometimes the cheapest car in Britain could still win.
Number 6. The Ford Popular.
Launched in 1953 at Dagenham, the Popular was, quite literally, Britain's lowest-priced new car, £390 after tax. And it earned that price by going backwards. It reused an older body and running gear, a chassis design dating to 1932. No radio, no heater, no carpet. Even its single windscreen wiper slowed down under hard acceleration. Yet the Ford Pop sold over 155,000 units because for thousands of working-class families, it was the difference between a motorcycle and a proper car. Decades later, its stripped-down simplicity made it the darling of Britain's hot rod scene. Ford, though, wasn't only building budget cars. At the very same factory, it was quietly rewriting the rules of suspension engineering.
Number 5. The Ford Zephyr. Unveiled in 1950 and launched in 1951, the Zephyr brought something to Dagenham that no mass-produced car in the world had used before: McPherson strut independent front suspension, patented by engineer Earl S. McPherson after he left General Motors. Britain got it first. The Zephyr served families, fleets and executives alike, offered with leather seats and white-wall tyres for those wanting extra luxury, and became a favourite of police highway patrols. In 1953, a Zephyr driven by Maurice Gatsonides won the Monte Carlo Rally outright. Across the decade, Dagenham built over 1.06 million of them, a suspension design still used in cars built today. Still, none of this mattered if a family couldn't afford a car built for 4 adults. That's where our next car came in.
Number 4. The Austin A30 and A35. Unveiled in 1951 as the new Austin 7, the A30 was Longbridge's first ever monocoque design and the launch vehicle for the BMC A-Series engine, a powertrain that would go on to power the Morris Minor, the Austin Healey Sprite, and eventually the Mini itself. Combined A30 and A35 production topped 577,000 units. Compact, frugal, and easy to park on narrow British roads, it became especially popular with first-time owners and small businesses. So popular that when the Mini launched in August 1959, BMC kept the A35 in production for weeks afterward, just to keep dealer stock topped up. But for true British devotion, one car outdid them all for over a decade, and it started with a very unflattering description.
Number 3. The Ford Anglia. A fixture of driving schools and suburban streets across Britain, the Anglia was reinvented in 1959 with a radically modern shape, complete with a reverse slant space-age rear window and a new overhead valve Kent engine. It sold at a pace that shattered British production records the moment it launched. That Kent engine block proved so durable it later formed the basis of the Lotus twin-cam engine and powered the entire Formula Ford racing series for decades. Combined, the Anglia topped 1.5 million units across the decade, a car so ordinary it became extraordinary. Yet even the Anglia bowed to a car designed by one man to solve one very specific problem: how to fit a family into something small without making them miserable.
Number 2. The Morris Minor. Designed by Alec Isigonis and unveiled in 1948, the Minor became in December 1960 the first British car in history to pass 1 million units sold. Lord Nuffield reportedly hated the prototype, comparing it to a poached egg, so Isigonis famously sliced a test car down the middle and widened it by 4 inches. With torsion bar front suspension and rack and pinion steering, the Minor handled like nothing else in its class: smooth, precise, almost sporting. It was owned by country doctors, postal workers and district nurses alike, and its timber-framed traveller estate became a fixture of rural England. Total lifetime production, 1,619,958. But even the Minor's achievement would be overshadowed by a crisis in the Suez Canal and the tiny car it accidentally inspired.
Number 1.
The Mini. In 1956, the Suez Crisis triggered fuel rationing across Britain. BMC's chairman, Sir Leonard Lord, ordered Alec Issigonis to design a proper small car that would, in his words, drive the foreign bubble cars off the road. The result, launched on August 26, 1959, changed everything. By mounting its 848cc engine transversely and putting the gearbox inside the engine's own oil sump, Issigonis freed up 80% of the car's floor length for passengers and luggage, all within a footprint just 10 feet long. Rubber cone suspension, designed by Alex Moulton, replaced conventional springs entirely, giving it handling nobody expected from something so small. It wasn't perfect at first. Early winters saw rainwater leaking through the floor welds and stalling the ignition, and BMC, it turned out, was losing roughly £30 on every basic Mini it sold, thanks to miscalculated production costs. But none of that stopped it. The Mini became Britain's first truly classless car, driven by factory workers and film stars alike, by the Beatles and by royalty. Total lifetime production, 5,387,862 units, making it the best-selling British car in history. And its transverse front-wheel drive layout became the blueprint that over 80% of the world's cars still use today.
10 cars, 1 decade, and an entire nation rebuilt around them. In 1950, Britain was still driving cars with side-valve engines and separate chassis frames, leftovers from before the war. By 1959, it had pioneered monocoque construction, McPherson struts, and front-wheel drive layouts that would define the next 50 years of automotive engineering worldwide. More than that, these cars did something government policy never intended. They put ordinary families, not just the wealthy, behind the wheel and changed what it meant to belong in Britain. If you're wondering what happened next, how the Mini's tiny footprint and clever packaging sparked a full-blown design revolution across the swinging 60s, and which British cars actually dominated that decade, that's a story we've already told. Go check it out next, because the 1950s were just the warm-up.